Thoughts of writing and illustrating a memoir in graphic novel form had been on Marjane's mind for a very long time. However, it was prejudicial behavior that pushed her over the edge. Living in France at the time, she repeatedly found herself in so many arguments defending generalizations of Iranians. And more often than not, her opponents viewed all Iranians as radicalized terrorists in the making. Now, over time, it became compelling to be able to tell people, there is a book, you can read it, rather than constantly arguing. You know how people are, she said. The less they know, the more convinced they are. Ignorance gives you this confidence in yourself. That being said, she never for one single moment considered that anyone would be interested in such a book. Now, as mentioned earlier, using mere writing as a form of expression was not an option. She had two passions to fulfill, both writing and drawing. She felt that simply writing led her to lose her sense of humor. She became too serious. Thus, the only choice for her was both. You see, the drawing is the narration. Whatever she doesn't write, she draws. A drawing might well be the first human language, but that didn't mean it was or is an easy route. Marjane meticulously deliberated over which frames needed text and which words were best presented as pure images. Writing, according to her, is not what you say, but how you say it. It's about finding your own particular language, and in doing so, making even the most ordinary actions become extraordinary. She began by writing a few pages, but soon found that she had too much resentment and anger connected to the stories. Despite wanting the pages to come from a perspective of forgiveness, she found herself wanting to punish everyone and often wanting to kill everyone responsible for the horrible behavior she was forced to witness and live through. She needed a break. She needed to cool down, take a breath. If not, she would be exactly like the people she was aiming to write about. She too would be full of negative energy and anger. By taking that step back, she found it easier to analyze and therefore easier to convey her thoughts in a more nuanced fashion. Art was a vast part of Marjane's life. However, there came a time when she questioned her artistry after being shaken by a setback when her work was rejected upon her initial dive into the French art scene. Now, this rejection led to her seeking other avenues of employment. She even considered becoming a private detective. Unable to find work, however, she became depressed. Then one day she saw a TV ad for a company in search of headhunters. And believe it or not, she literally thought the company was looking for headhunters. Thus, she showed up to the interview in multi-pocketed, baggy army pants. She was convinced that she'd get the job when she saw the other women in the waiting room wearing suits and other nice clothing. Well, during the interview, excited about the prospects of this new opportunity, she asked about weapons. Well, needless to say, she was quite shocked to find out that she was not what they were looking for. Now, her last failed interview was at a fur store where it was made quite apparent that her knowledge of fur only pertained to fox fur. So, with no future hopes of becoming a fur saleswoman, a private detective, or a headhunter, she went back to her calling, drawing and writing. From the time she arrived in France in 1994, she shared many stories about life in Iran with her friends. Pieces about Iran would appear on television. However, the images on the screen did not represent her experience at all. She found herself repeatedly telling her friends that it was not like that. Well, changing lanes to her life in France, she attended art school for 4 years and then decided to continue for an additional 3 years in order to receive her visa. Now, getting that visa opened many doors of exploration for her. For instance, the possibility to draw or paint nudes in Iran was out of the question. As a matter of fact, once when assigned to draw a male model, she was told not to look at the model. Shocked, she asked if she was expected to draw the male model without looking at him. The teacher's response? Yes, look at the door and draw the model. It was precisely those taboos that made her want to explore all sorts of settings for drawing. Marjane lived in a shared studio in Paris because she couldn't afford to pay the rent for a studio on her own. The group she worked alongside encouraged her to do something with the stories she told about her life in Iran. Their encouragement was coupled with an introduction to the world of graphic novels. The big turning point actually came with the first one she was introduced to, Art Spiegelman's Mouse, which, as mentioned, you can learn more about on episode 12 of House of Words. But when reading Mouse, she realized how it was possible to tell a story and make a point at the same time. She always considered comics the work of monks on account of how much obsession was part of the work, how you worked frame after frame continually with seemingly no end in sight. And while she didn't consider herself to be an obsessive person, she did discover that she was, surprisingly enough, suited for the work. Learning how to create a graphic novel in the process of working on one, she realized that anything she would draw would have meaning for the people who would read it. If she used color, it would have meaning. If she drew backgrounds, it would have meaning. Furthermore, she was under the impression that what she had to say was too much, too complicated, too wordy. Concerning this, she realized that she had to go very mellow on the other end, or else ruin the rhythm of the reading. That's also why she went for something completely black and white with extremely minimalistic emphasis, all in order to enhance the rhythm of the reading. And when she began working on Persepolis, she was convinced that no publisher would want to publish it. Nevertheless, Marjane wanted to tell her story. Worst case scenario, she could print it herself and give it to her closest friends and family. Now, just so happens, the novel was published. The pessimist in her, however, didn't expect it to sell more than 300 copies. It's safe to say that it made it to 300 and many times beyond. Persepolis would go on to win several awards and was lauded as an immense success. In 2013, however, Chicago schools were ordered by the district to remove the novel from classrooms because of the work's graphic language and violence. Now, this banning incited protest and controversy and stirred international headlines for much of 2013. No stranger to censorship, she was unfazed. Having a look at the list of those who kept her company on the USA Banned Books list, she laughed it off and found it rather cool. In an interview, she commented that if you want a teen to read a book, the best way to go about that was to ban it. Well, she couldn't be more right, as the sales of Persepolis spiked after the ban. She was, of course, pleased to see a surge of renewed interest in her work. She further commented on the absurdity of U.S. censorship laws, saying, "How you can show the bloodiest, most violent scenes, but if you say the word fuck twice, your film is labeled PG-18.